Good evening to our audience in DC and good morning to our audience in Japan. My name is Jennifer Gordon and I'm the Atlantic Council's Director of the Nuclear Energy Policy Initiative, and we are here live at the Atlantic Council studio. And we are having a conversation, we will be about to have a conversation to launch the Atlantic Council's new report, The Global Future of Nuclear Energy by Matt Bowen. But first, I am very delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Tatsuya Terazawa, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. Terazawa-san, we are so happy to have you with us. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning and good evening to everyone. It is my great pleasure and honor to co-host this event with the Atlantic Council to launch their new report, the global future of nuclear energy. In 2011, about 12 years ago, we had a nuclear accident in Fukushima. Since then, the development of nuclear energy in the world has slowed down significantly, not just in Japan, but worldwide. But recently, we're now observing a reemergence of interest in nuclear energy worldwide. Especially about 2 years ago, we are seeing more movements. In February of 2021, the French President Macron announced France's new policy to construct at least 6 and possibly 14 new nuclear reactors. In April of 2022, UK announced its energy strategy to construct 8 new nuclear units. And especially after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, a number of Eastern European countries, including Poland, have announced their plans to construct new nuclear units. So it's more than just interest. We are now seeing momentum towards nuclear energy in the world. I see 2 factors behind this momentum. One factor is the global climate change. Many countries recognize that in order to realize carbon neutrality, they would have to have nuclear energy as part of their energy mix. In fact, nuclear power provides a very precious zero carbon power. Especially if we consider the intermittency of renewable energy, such as wind power and solar power, it is extremely important to have zero carbon base load power generation. And nuclear power can provide this very precious zero carbon base load power. The second factor is energy security. Prior to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Russia had been supplying 25% of the global gas market and 12% of the global oil market. If we are to reduce our dependence on Russian fossil fuel, it is extremely important to expand the use of nuclear energy. So with these factors, we are seeing momentum for nuclear power. And it is not just within the European continent. If we look at the US, recently, with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, we understand that credits will be provided to extend the operation of existing older nuclear power plants in the US. With the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, we understand that tax credits will be provided to support the operation of nuclear power plants in the US. We in Japan are keenly interested in learning about the new policies in the US surrounding nuclear energy, and also understand the background behind those new policies. And we would like to look into the prospects of nuclear energy in the US. And these movements or developments or momentum or interests are not limited among the advanced economies. I have many opportunities to discuss energy policies with the energy experts especially from the Southeast Asian countries. They're expressing their interest in nuclear, especially with the introduction of SMR, small modular reactors. For those countries, which might have been more difficult to consider large-scale nuclear reactors, considering their modest size of their economies, SMR is now providing an option, realistic option, for those Asian countries as well. Now, let me turn to Japan. It is natural for a country who have experienced the nuclear accident in Fukushima in 2011 to virtually stop serious discussion about nuclear power. In fact, it was extremely difficult to discuss about nuclear power politically because of the nuclear accident for years. But with all the changes in the world and all the changes in the environment, Prime Minister Kishida announced in December of last year in his GX roadmap, Green Transformation Roadmap, that he will be advancing the nuclear energy policies in Japan. He identified 3 policy areas. The first is to to restart the existing nuclear power plants. This is very special in Japan because since 2013, no prime ministers in Japan have backed the restart of nuclear power plants with his political capital. The second policy area is to extend the operation of existing nuclear power plants beyond the statutory limit of 60 years. What is noteworthy is that Prime Minister Kishida was actually successful in passing the legislation through our diet, which is our parliament, to change our law to enable the extension of the operation lives of our nuclear power plants. The third policy area is to replace the existing nuclear power plants with advanced new generation nuclear reactors with advanced safety features. So considering once again the fact that only 12 years ago we had experienced the nuclear accident, now we are making significant positive steps towards the use of nuclear power policy. While we are seeing positive developments, as I described, we still face a number of challenges. The first is that while we have successfully restarted 12 nuclear reactors so far, we still have 21 nuclear reactors still offline. It has taken so much time to get the authorization from the newly established NRA, the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, and some locations face challenges obtaining consent from their local communities. While Prime Minister Kishida announced his intention to replace the existing nuclear power plants, the business environment to enable such investment by the private sector companies are not sufficient. We need to improve the business environment to enable investment in the replacement of nuclear reactors. We are facing other challenges as well. We have not been able to provide the full solution to the back end of the nuclear cycle. And the number of students studying nuclear science has decreased significantly. And it's not just about the younger generation. The engineers and workers who have had actual experience in the construction of nuclear power plants are getting older. So while we have strong and high hopes for nuclear energy in Japan, we are facing a number of challenges. I strongly believe that this event will provide a very valuable opportunity for the experts from the US and Japan and the policymakers from both countries to discuss about the current situation surrounding nuclear and talk about the policies and backgrounds behind those policies and discuss about the prospects for nuclear power in both countries as well as globally, and also identify the challenges that we will be facing and explore possible solutions to address those challenges. Thank you very much, everyone, to participate in this very important event, and I wish for very successful and fruitful discussions today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Teruzawa-san. Truly appreciate your insights and your keynote remarks. And now I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. Matt Bowen, who is Senior Research Scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Matt is also a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. The Honorable William F. Martin, who is Chairman of the Washington Policy and Analysis. Amy Roma, Partner and Global Energy Practice Leader at Hogan Lovells. Amy is also a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. And Yukari Yamashita, who is Managing Director for Energy Data and Modeling Center at the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. Welcome, everyone. So, Matt, for the first question, I would like to go back to the way in which Teruzawa-san began his remarks, where he talked about the momentum behind nuclear energy right now, both for recognizing nuclear as an asset in fighting climate change, but then also because nuclear energy provides energy security. So it seems like at this moment, nuclear is well poised to answer both of these questions. What is your opinion, and how do you view today's landscape for nuclear energy?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and thank you to the Atlantic Council for holding this. Yes, I agree. The fundamentals, I think, supporting a potential growth in nuclear energy usage are still in place, and we've seen a fairly fluid policy landscape over the last couple of years, including from external events such as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's prompted a lot of policy discussions here in the United States about how we might wean ourselves off of Russian fuel. So that episode in particular has pushed energy security to the forefront of the energy discussions, I think, around the world, especially in Eastern Europe, where we've seen this growth and interest in potential deployment of new reactors, including some U.S. reactors. Poland's taken some recent steps towards a potential new program there. In the United States, we've had a number of laws passed, Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, that have provided direction to the federal government to modernize licensing. I think that's going to continue to be an area of activity in the coming years. The Inflation Reduction Act included these tax credits that would incentivize the building of new reactors. And in the United States, I'd say the 2020s appear to be this period of advanced reactor demonstration, where at the end of that, hopefully we have some new options, because as was mentioned earlier, in a world where we do care about decarbonization and we do see this rising use of variable renewable energy, nuclear's dispatchable attributes are increasingly valuable, and it could be not just a source of electricity to balance the grid, but also a source of low carbon heat to try and decarbonize some of these other sectors beyond electricity. So, you know, in my mind, you know, if we really are going to be serious about trying to bring down emissions and mitigate some of these risks from climate change, whether it's the IEA modeling or the IPCC modeling, nuclear tends to generically grow under these scenarios.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'd like to turn to the policy context of Japan, and Yamashita-san, ask you a question. We understand that 5 laws about electricity have been revised in order to secure the steady supply of electricity while accelerating decarbonization in Japan. So what are the implications of that for nuclear energy?
Oh, thank you very much for your question. As our chairman Terazawa has mentioned, the surrounding in Japan about the nuclear policy has changed drastically for the last year or so. And then it ended up the revision or addition of this law, which actually is not focusing only on the nuclear, but also together with the renewable. This is very epoch-making for Japan, because we have been seeing the discussion or debate making these two as the, how to say, the competitive or the totally the opposite the entry for the clean energy mix, like a 100% renewables or no nuclear, or 100 the other side. But this one is to aim at aim at showing that the government is upfront to support the nuclear. This is the first thing. And second thing is that they make it clear that the over 30 years old nuclear will they face the safety the check, which will be the detailed check, and then every decade after that they will face that check, and then thirdly they allow these existing nuclear power stations to omit the period where they have been stopped so long waiting for the safety check or some other incident where they face to close for one full year or stop full year even after they restarted. So these were omitted, and then we will have a little bit longer than 40 years of operation for these existing power plants, and then that is very important for us. On the side, they also have this 30 years over the safety check will be strengthened. And then all these things, along with the recognition that the back end has to be emphasized, and also the innovative technologies will be promoted. We have a whole set of a nuclear policy, which is shown by the government that they support it, and then we go forward. Of course, with the condition that local the population's agreement will be there, or the safety is put as the priority. But what is more also important is that they put the renewable side together with this nuclear the act. They try to how does it accelerate the connectivity of the new renewable electricity to the central power grid. As well, they emphasize that there will be the consideration for the distributed usage of the renewables. So these two as a set of the clean electricity, we can go forward. So that was a very clear message from the government that we include nuclear alongside with the renewable as a clean electricity.
Yamashita-san, thank you so much for such an excellent overview of the policy landscape in Japan. I would like to turn to a little bit of a conversation about industry. And Bill, it's hard to think of anyone with more extensive experience in both the industry in the United States and also in Japan. Give us a bit of an overview of how you see the current state of industry, of nuclear industry in both countries.
Well, first I want to thank Vice Minister, Chairman of the Energy Institute for being with us. He's a very special guy, and he lived through the post-Fukushima period. Let's remember, Jennifer, that in 2009 we had more reactors in the United States and more reactors in Japan operating. We're now living in a fossil fuel world. In the United States, let's look at industry for a minute. I chaired the nuclear committee, of the United States. I was pro-nuclear in a very strong way for my life. But let's face the fact that gas at $3 per MCF, that's $18 a barrel, that's a tough competitor. I see industry moving towards more gas. I see them improving existing reactors. I also see this in Japan as a priority. How do we improve existing reactors? It's extraordinary that nuclear completely stopped in Japan 12 years ago, and now 12 reactors are started, on their way to 17, maybe on to 30. This is an economic achievement that's unparalleled in history, that an industry that was really down has risen so rapidly and carefully. Now, that raises the issue of new reactors. So we're starting behind 2008 as we start now. So we're kind of climbing back to where we were 15 years ago. I think regulation is very important. One of the big problems in Japan is the nuclear regulatory apparatus. I know the chairman and president and CEO of Athena is here in the audience tonight. He's the go-between between government and the industry, and we can see that NRA has been pretty tough. Amy knows more about that than I do, but NRC seems to be doing pretty well. But we need what I'd call internationalization of regulation to get nuclear moving again. I don't see a lot of growth in the United States with nuclear. I'm very hopeful, Matt. As your report points out, we've got the SMRs, but I'm going to quote a study I did in 2008 at the Hoover Institute. That's that institute on the other coast. And it was by a very good friend of mine. I won't quote his name, but he wanted to say, well, I will, it was Richter. And he won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1975. And he put in our report, well, we talk a lot and we build nothing. I said, Dr. Richter, that's a little rough. You know, can't we be a little more positive? Damn it, no. Let me repeat, Bill, I get it. We talk a lot, we build nothing. So I kind of turned to kind of the experts here like you and Amy and Matt and saying, are we going to build anything? I mean, will we see nuclear rise up, or is it a fossil fuel world? Final comment, politically, we're deeply divided on this. I happen to be part of a Republican group for climate. There's 3 of us in the party. And let me say, when we talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and how much it's going to take in permitting to achieve that, I could see it flip if the Republicans win in 14 months, 50-50. This is renewables and this is nuclear. Now, nuclear does pretty well, but this is what I see happening. I see the return of energy dominance, I see the return of energy security, and I see downplaying of carbon. So we have to recognize in the United States, while Japan is on a steady course for improvement, we are deeply politically divided, but the one thing we agree upon is nuclear power. Your job is secure, Jennifer.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Amy, there was a lot, I think, to pick up on in Bill's remarks, but this idea that we're not good at building things, you've just returned from one country that's been extremely successful in nuclear and another that is hoping to build SMRs. So Finland on the one hand, Estonia on the other, and this report is about the global future of nuclear energy. So let's move for a moment beyond Japan and the United States. Talk to us about some of your key takeaways from your recent travels.
So thanks, Jennifer, and I'm very impressed with you keeping up with my travel schedule. So Jennifer's right. I just returned from a trip to Finland and Estonia. Both of them were very interesting trips. I think to Bill's point, are we building anything? Is anybody building anything? Well, Finland just had its 4th nuclear power plant come online. It provides about 40, they now get about 40% of their power from nuclear. And overwhelmingly carbon-free power within the country because of how they intentionally developed their energy mix, which is not too different from how Japan has developed its own energy mix, where you had a very strong national security interest in having energy independence and not relying on neighboring countries that may not be so friendly and may turn to weaponize their power, your power supply. And so they didn't want to rely on Russia for natural gas. And so they very proactively only get, I think, about 6% of their power from Russian natural gas, and then that's transitioning out. So they built nuclear so that they would have energy independence and security, as well as, I think at the time they probably weren't thinking so much about carbon-free power, at least when their first nuclear power plants came online. But certainly as the later ones came online, that was very much at the front of mind. And then turning to Estonia, so took the ferry across. And the other interesting thing I'd say about Finland is, like Japan, they at least have done something about the back end of their fuel cycle. And they've built a deep geologic repository that is co-located next to an operating nuclear power plant with really not much fanfare within the country. It wasn't too problematic. The local community volunteered for it, and it was not too difficult to get that through, as I understand. So then moving over to Estonia. Estonia is a very interesting country. It also does not want to rely on natural gas from Russia. While I was there, there was a pipeline attack on a natural gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea. And they get the majority of their power from oil shale, which I had to go and look up because I'm like, that can't be right. So they are, and they are looking at not only decarbonization, but energy security and energy independence as well. And so they are very interested, like a lot of Central and Eastern European countries, at building new nuclear. And I think, Matt, you mentioned Poland, Romania, a whole host of countries. When you overlap that, everybody wants to make sure that when you go and turn the light switch, the light turns on. And if it's carbon-free, fantastic. And so they want to make sure they can flip the light switch and that they're not going to have to mortgage their house in order to do that. And it was not that long ago that I was on a Zoom call with somebody who was in the Czech Republic, and the price of electricity was so high that they had to shut off their electricity in the middle of winter. And so this is a PhD physicist who's sitting there in his parka in the middle of his house, with a hat and gloves on because the price of electricity was so high. That's ridiculous in this day and age. And so we're seeing a strong interest in those countries in developing nuclear for both decarbonization purposes, but most importantly, energy security. And so they overlap with each other. And the US government has a strong incentive to help support that relationship in developing those technologies. Because of the locations of those countries and because we want to help promote democracy and stabilize those areas as well. And so there's a lot of US government support. There was an announcement from the G7 that said that a whole host of countries were going to cooperate on nuclear power collaboration. US and Japan were two of those countries, as well as a few other countries, saying, hey, we want to help support our allies so that they have energy security and independence. So can we collaborate with each other? Because there are some things that the Japanese are very good at, some things that the Americans are very good at, some things that the French are very good at, some things the Canadians are very good at, and they can all share their best practices with each other with a common goal of helping to provide this energy security and independence as well as decarbonization for a host of these countries. And then I'm just going to circle back to Bill's comment of, are we building? So there are a number of nuclear power plant projects planned in the United States. The Advanced Reactor Demonstration Project through the Department of Energy is funding 2 of those to the tune of over $1 billion in US government support. And those projects are moving forward in the United States. One of them is, interestingly enough, not a traditional power reactor project, but it's between X-Energy and Dow Chemical to provide carbon-free power and process heat to help decarbonize a Dow plant in Texas. And the other one is TerraPower Pacificor project to help transition a coal community off of the coal plant was closing onto nuclear. And so to provide clean jobs, interestingly in a state that's never had nuclear before, but there's a huge amount of support within the state of Wyoming for that project. And they're both very, very interesting projects to watch.
Good.
Yeah. Amy, thank you so much. And a lot of comments there that I want to pick up on and come back to over the course of the conversation. Matt, you and I have talked a lot about the idea of allies co-financing or working together to finance new nuclear builds, especially in emerging market countries. And I think that this is really important when you look at the competition between the United States and our allies on the one hand, and then Russia and China on the other with state-owned nuclear enterprises. So talk to us a little bit about what you see as the potential for cooperation around financing.
Yeah, I feel like in the last year, financing has come to the forefront of the nuclear discussion, in part because some of these discussions with other countries have gotten to the point where, financing a large capital-intensive project like nuclear is absolutely essential. And some of these countries, especially developing countries, it's a question: where are they going to get the money to do these projects? As you mentioned, we've seen discussions about these sort of co-financing strategies. U.S. reactors are going to have components supply chain from U.S. allies like Japan and South Korea, and so it would be a logical kind of partnership in terms of governments providing financing to support their own content, and that could help with the competition against, say, the Russians and Chinese. I did a project last year where myself and a colleague were looking at the financing offers that the state-owned entities in Russia and China have been making to other countries in support of their reactor exports, and comparing it against the terms that are in the OECD arrangement on export credits. And we found something that I had been hearing for many years, was that you can point to these various instances where it very much looks like the terms that Russia and China are offering to these countries are more generous than what the OECD arrangement would permit, which of course the United States, Japan, and others are
Matt, what about Saudi Arabia? Let's be very specific here. It's nice to talk in a globalized terms, but I mean, Russia and China, if I were Saudi Arabia, I'd look to China for nuclear reactors and I'd send them gas. I think the geopolitics have changed to push Saudi Arabia. We've pushed Saudi Arabia away because of our fossil fuel destruction program. I'm worried. I think they have an in, and I think our competitive advantage, we got to go to the gold standard. Should Saudi Arabia have the gold standard, and how do we achieve that?
Well, so let's actually go back to Matt's point on co-financing, and the example that always comes to my mind after last October, the notion, the agreement between the United States on the one hand and Japan on the other, led by JBIC, to help cooperate on constructing or deploying SMRs in Ghana, which I think is this perfect marriage between these two countries, the United States and Japan, to then help an emerging market country come online with technology from the US and our allies. So I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, or now I just commented on it. So.
No, I think that was the canonical example I think I used in the report, and certainly could be replicated in other instances too. And we've had discussion in Congress and the executive branch on what else we could do to sort of modernize our financing institutes. So we have the Export-Import Bank. There's been some discussion on, could we raise the default rate that's currently applied to it so that it's more even with what, say, other countries use, and that might help Exim Bank to lean a little bit more forward on some of these nuclear projects. The Development Finance Corporation, up until a few years ago, had a legacy prohibition on supporting nuclear projects, which was lifted. And we have seen over the past year, actually, a couple of letters of intent, so not actual financing, but at least it's a sign from an entity that historically was not even allowed to work in the nuclear space to help with some of these countries. I think those are some promising signs.
Absolutely. And I think if you look back, and I was thinking earlier today about the task force report that the Atlantic Council wrote 5 years ago, and I think it would be interesting to go back and look at all of these policy recommendations that we made then, including DFC and reauthorizing Exim, and see what has come of those recommendations and the delta between then and now. But Yamashita-san, I would like to go back to you. Because we talk a lot about securing supply chains all throughout the energy industry. And I think, in this context, of course, the nuclear supply chain is absolutely crucial. So tell us a little bit more about your insights and your work on the supply chain.
Oh, thank you again for your question, Amy. As Terazawa-san has mentioned in his opening remark, am I still on?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Japan is an aging society, and then our concern is about the nuclear industry, which is supposed to have multi-layered industries which support all the technologies which will run the nuclear power stations. But and then also it was a part of the reason why, just like for the renewable, we expect the green employment. We had the nuclear employment throughout the supply chain. But because of the aging, and then because of this redundant era for about more than a decade, we have been losing the expertise or the experienced engineers retiring from the industry. And then that doesn't necessarily refer only to the power really the power generation part, but also the construction part, which is like the supplier of the parts for the power stations, and then also the maintaining part. Therefore, it is very, very important to stop right now to think about the supply chain and then start collaboration or start helping out those the small and medium scale industries, inclusive the supplying the partners to how to retain them and how to hand the technology over to the next generation. And that also includes the how to attract the young students to come into the this industry. Therefore, this is a whole supply chain issue within Japan. Therefore, the ministry has put out the platform where the local the wings of the ministry as well as the industry association will collaborate and then try to help out these retiring companies and then the industries. That is one thing. But also, we also need to secure the supply of the uranium. It's not it is part of the energy security issue also. So overall energy security has been actually put aside when we are focusing on the climate change issue, but it is coming back. And then we really face the hard reality that the world is connected, but sometimes our interests are different. Therefore, the like-minded nuclear promoting countries need to collaborate on this matter. There are many things which we can do in the international collaboration, but also the recognizing the supply chain issue and then try to help each other by exchanging engineers or try to participate in the other countries' advanced technologies development is very much of interest for all the countries which are promoting these technologies.
Yamashita-san, thank you so much. And I want to emphasize what you just said because I think it's so important that the world is connected, but our interests can be different. And then that is why it's so important for like-minded countries to cooperate and work together. And I think also, when I was asking about the supply chain, to remember that it's not just the supply chain of materials, but it's also the people who are working in this industry and in this field, and it's knowledge. And so, Bill, with that, I want to go to you and ask, what do you see as some of the key issues in workforce development in the nuclear energy industry right now?
Well, you start with developing countries. I mean, one of the challenges we have, I think, in exporting technology to the developing world, we have the non-proliferation challenge, we have the economic, we have the competition with Russia and China, which shows you, Jennifer, that you need the holistic approach to nuclear. You just can't look at nuclear. You've got to look at geopolitics. That is what's driving Eastern Europe. I got back from Prague over the weekend. Got the national award, by the way.
Congratulations.
Must have said the right thing. But in any event, they are very interested in nuclear. There's a deep shift here between Central Europe and the Baltic states and, let's face it, Germany. I've got to ask myself, if these other nations are trying to get off, from Russian gas, what in the hell is Germany thinking by getting rid of nuclear? What is Korea thinking of getting rid of nuclear? It's not an easy argument. I'm not asking you a question, but back to workforce, which is critical. In Japan, U.S.-Japan. Japan's got a problem because TEPCO, the boiling water reactors haven't operated a reactor in 12 years. No operator experience. How do they actually bring these on safely? It's remarkable that Kyushu and Kansai have 12 reactors, but those were ones that were less affected. Those two companies have 100% back to where they were pre-Fukushima. Remarkable. But now we've got Kashiwazaki, we've got Onagawa, we've got Higashidori. And where and how is the training going to happen? I think in our country, we always relied on the nuclear navy. When nuclear was not of any interest to anybody, and we've gone through phases like that, we could rely on the nuclear navy. I think a big focus, I know we're talking about build here, I think a big focus has got to be on existing reactors. Dick Meserve told me, a reactor that extended 100 years, that's a new reactor. It's not an old reactor, it's brand new. The other issue in Japan is siting. They're not going to have new sites. They have to develop the community relations. So I view Japan's strategy as a very prudent one. Get existing reactors going, extend the life, have new reactors, and put them where existing plants are. United States, I hate to be a pessimist here, but I think it comes down to economics. I don't know any utility company that's going to go up against natural gas. And we have enormous gas reserves, not only in the United States, but Canada and eventually Alaska. Nuclear has to compete economically in the marketplace. And I think that's going to be the greatest challenge. Workforce, finally, I think people are returning to nuclear. They like nuclear. All of a sudden, nuclear is kind of the thing. Fusion is exciting. So really, I think the environment exists today to expand nuclear, but we've really got to capture the moment.
Absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so much. And Amy, I'd like to go to you because we're so fortunate to have you here with us to talk about regulatory harmonization. And Matt's report specifically talks about the agreements between the United States and Canada. But what do you think, and can you share with us what regulatory harmonization might look like in practice?
So there's maybe several tiers to think of when you think of regulatory harmonization. And so the first tier, I think, is bilateral communications and sharing of information between the US and another country that is planning on deploying the similar technology. And so the bilateral agreements that are in place between the US and Canada are aimed at trying to share information from reviews between the regulators and try to find common ground where maybe one regulator doesn't need to re-review something another regulator has. And so that's very much an organic process, and it's happening now in real time, and it's working pretty well. Both the NRC and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission speak very highly of the process, and the industry also speaks highly of the process as well. And so a number of applicants are applying to either the NRC or to the Canadian authorities, asking for them to coordinate with each other to support that review. And I think that's the low-hanging fruit on harmonization, is how can countries support each other in the first instance. Where it gets more complicated is how do we do this on a global level. So the IAEA has an initiative on how to promote global harmonization of regulatory reviews so that you're not starting over again every time you enter into a new country. And I have worked, interestingly enough, on applications of foreign technologies that were built in the United States. So I worked on the licensing of the Urenco USA facility, which was the deployment of a technology, a uranium enrichment technology that was already used in Europe and deployed in the United States, and then on the STP 3 and 4 project, which was the Japanese ABWR reactor design. And there was a lot more we could have leveraged from both those regulatory reviews. You would think this has already been deployed in another country. Can we get some kind of fast track here in the United States? But in fact, it oftentimes resulted in additional work because you had to submit to the regulator the information necessary for you to get your license, but then the regulator was like, well, what is the operational experience that you can now incorporate? And so people were doing additional work to try to do that. We can do this a better way. I think that's a bigger, it's a bigger ask of the international community and the regulators and the industry to get some kind of everybody agrees on the same thing type principle. But I think that the more we have the US and Canada working together, the US and the UK working together, the US and Japan working together, the more organically we'll move in that direction, so it becomes harder to do.
And so to go back to a point that you made a few moments ago, if you have a situation where you don't have to have the regulator re-review because it's already been reviewed by a partner country, are you saving time? Are you saving money? What's kind of the scale there?
So the NRC charges by person, by hour for a review. The licensing review fees for NuScale for design certification were upwards of $75 million. If you can shave off some time in reviewing, you are going to significantly save not only money, but time as well. And I think it's collaborating on a first of a kind is always the hardest. Licensing a first of a kind where you're looking at something that's new and different than something that has been proposed before requires innovative thinking and paving a new road. Once that road is paved, we should just be driving a whole bunch of cars down it. And so I think that's the goal, right? And we can't get there if we just license one and don't license another one. Or if we just license one X-energy reactor, one TerraPower reactor, and then there's no kind of economy of scale that goes with doing it over again. I think the whole goal of this international harmonization is that we do expect a widespread deployment of reactors, not just in the US, not just in Canada, not just in the UK, but in these emerging countries that we've been talking about. And we're going to have to help them, help their regulators. Poland doesn't have a nuclear power program. And so the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the U.S. government are supporting Poland standing up that nuclear power program. And when you help them stand it up, they're going to be turning to you and looking at how your regulations are, which is another way that the U.S. can help align its interests with like-minded countries further.
Absolutely. Amy, thank you so much. Matt, we've been talking a lot this evening about the power sector and decarbonization of the power sector, but you've written a lot here about the role of nuclear in off-grid applications. And actually, Amy, a few moments ago, mentioned X-Energy's agreement with Dow, which I think is also an incredibly compelling use case for nuclear energy. So tell us a little bit more about what nuclear can do off the grid.
Yeah, and if I can quickly agree with Bill on an earlier point, I do agree that the landscape in the United States is really difficult for new nuclear and natural gas combined cycle. It's a cheap, sort of almost risk-free type option, and I will say it's not necessarily the case in every country. I think there are other countries that don't have as cheap alternatives, and nuclear may look better. I'd also say, we're sort of confronting this gigantic market flaw, right, where the external costs associated with fossil fuel use, whether it's air pollution or carbon emissions, are not internalized in the price that we see from these fossil plants. And I regularly feel like our actual commitment to addressing climate change is where nuclear's fortunes will rise or fail. I mean, as much as we talk about climate change, there's no law in the United States forcing decarbonization or requiring it. We have a few states that have passed clean energy standards. I think actually Michigan, my home state, just passed a law. And then a few utilities have made these non-binding commitments. And some of those have talked about, if you can't run natural gas plants, traditional natural gas plants, you got to have something. And so they have put in SMRs into their utility plans. But I agree in general. We'll see how firm those non-binding commitments turn out.
If we could internalize the externalities, as you say, nuclear would have a huge market.
Okay.
Next book, next report.
Next report. But okay, so yes, for off-grid and process heat, I am fascinated to see what the future of that X-Energy project is, because at least in the United States, all of our reactors are used exclusively for electricity generation. That's starting to change a little bit, I guess, with some of these awards, but historically that's been the case. It hasn't been the case everywhere across the world. And reactors have been used in colder climates for district heating. And actually, we're seeing in China, they're planning to use these AP1000s for some amount of district heating. And of course, you could do that elsewhere, including in the United States, and replace some of the fossil fuel use there. The X-Energy case, if they could really break into this sort of manufacturing, sort of industrial use case and make it work, that would be a fascinating new area for nuclear to grow in. And there's some very challenging sectors in terms of trying to decarbonize them. And just to finish that up, another area in the past year that's been interesting is this. The Inflation Reduction Act had some tax credits for hydrogen production, and in particular for lower carbon hydrogen production. And there's been some discussion about whether you could use existing nuclear power plants and use them to produce low carbon hydrogen, which is looked at as a potential Swiss Army knife. You can do all kinds of things with hydrogen and maybe replace fossil fuels in some of these high temperature applications that right now it's not exactly clear what would be the low carbon alternative that looked reasonably priced. So yeah, I mean, nuclear produces heat. That's what you start with. And then for the big, large light water reactors, you lose 2/3 of that in converting it to electricity. But if that's the end goal, well, that's what you start with nuclear. So it might be a really promising way forward.
Thanks so much, Matt. And yeah, absolutely. I think that we're seeing, certainly in the conversation, plenty of other uses beyond the power sector for nuclear. And as you mentioned, hydrogen production, but of course also desalination. Decarbonization of heavy industries like mining. So a number of different potential use cases. Yamashita-san, I'd like to go back to you and also I'd like to go back to the notion of international cooperation. To what extent do you see opportunities for international collaboration with nuclear technologies and with the policy landscape that we've been discussing?
Okay. Before answering that question, let me quickly touch upon the Matt's point. I do agree. I would like to echo the point that the non-grid applications is very important, especially for the industrial, centered, manufacturing centered economy like Japan. Non-power sector, how to decarbonize them is a challenge. We have been promoting the hydrogen, but also we need to benefit from the advanced technologies of nuclear, such as high temperature reactors. That's quickly said. The international collaboration has been helping us to come out of this dark age of after Fukushima. We had to ask for the help from the other countries to give us the hint or to give us the light that what we have been believing, that to keep the existing nuclear power and reoperate them, restart them, is very important for the security reason, energy security reason. But that point is very difficult to communicate with the people because it is the higher scale macroeconomy level, even the political level importance of nuclear, while we are hit by this radiation discharge, and then the people are afraid of the technology. Why we need to go back to that technology was very hard, the hurdle to overcome. But this time after the Ukraine, around the world, every country started to worry about the supply chain or energy security. It is easier, but back then we are very happy with the surrounding this energy surrounding situation. That it was very difficult to the strength to point out that energy security is very important for country like Japan, which import more than 90% of energy from abroad. So for that, the international experts and even the IAEA and then all these people helped us to send the message to the people of Japan that from this point of view, nuclear technology is very important for your energy mix. Moreover, to develop the technologies, it is becoming very costly. Therefore, the collaboration here and there on the company basis, business basis is very, very important with the finance attached. Therefore, our companies are participating in the Canadian project or American project to commercialize the advanced nuclear reactors like SMR. And then that is very important for the industry. To continue to do their nuclear business and then keep their engineers with them. And then also they encourage the youngsters to come into the industry. Moreover, as mentioned earlier, the regulatory harmonization for the new technologies like advanced reactors is very important. It's painstaking the Canada and the US is doing, but it will certainly benefit all the following countries and then following companies. We have different experience within Japan where we had to address this new safety regulation, company by company, reactor by reactor. And then at the beginning, they did it individually, because this is their task to do it, and then what they need to do is to put up their reactor back online. But over time, we realized that it's a painstaking new process, and then why don't we collaborate each other? So within the industry, they collaborate, and then they sit for the next new the safety check reactors site, and then they help out what they have experienced already with their reactor to another reactor which is facing the new challenge, and then the process has becoming faster and faster. So collaboration is important even domestically, but internationally, if it's done, that will eventually help what the newcomers like developing world. I was in Poland last September, and that was just before they decided on which contractor to supply their new reactor. And then they were all over me. We would like to know about the Japan experience. It's not necessarily only about the formal process of the regulatory rule setting or even the technologies, but all the experiences we have gone through are precious for the newly nuclear introducing countries.
Yamashita-san, thank you so much. And I especially appreciate your emphasis on energy security and then also, of course, on international collaboration. Bill, I'd like to go to you. We don't have too much time left, but I'd like to start wrapping up by asking you, in your opinion, what does success look like for the global nuclear energy industry?
Well, first, Jennifer, thank you for hosting this, and Lauren Hughes, too, for bringing us together. The U.S.-Japan relationship is the most important relationship we have globally. They're our ally, they're our friend, they're in a dangerous part of the world. When I started working with IEEJ in 1973, that's 50 years ago with Mr. Sakisaka, their dependency, their self-sufficiency was about the same as it is today. So in 50 years, they've gone from 10% self-sufficient to 12%. That's extraordinary. You live in a dangerous part of the world. Their key partner is the United States, number one. U.S.-Japan is the most important. I would say the most important relationship within the relationship is nuclear energy. And that's why you see people like Dr. Meserve and Dale Klein and Dan Poneman and Ernie Moniz and myself and Amy. That's why we have our program that goes to Japan. So the Atlantic Council is on top of your game by... Now, what was the question you asked me?
What does success look like for the nuclear energy industry?
I think maintenance and growth in Japan, if they can go 12 to 17, up to 30 reactors, okay, I think that's a huge success. If they can do renewable energy too, maybe they can get up to 50% self-sufficiency, which I think is a safe level. In the United States, it's about competition. In the U.S. and Japan, we need the government to get behind the private sector, because the private sector cannot afford this transition if we are, and I hope, going to clean energy. And this is the bottom line, is we can achieve national security, environmental security, and economic security through nuclear power. So we have to internalize the externalities so we know what we're talking about and making that realizable in the marketplace.
Bill, thank you so much. And Amy, let me go to you. What do you see as some of the most promising opportunities right now in the nuclear energy industry?
The most promising opportunities are we need to deploy the ARDP projects that we have going on, decarbonization in industrial processes, so steel manufacturing, cement manufacturing, chemical manufacturing, and oil and gas industry are huge opportunities for both microreactors and advanced reactors. Westinghouse there are 10 AP1000s in operation in the world today. People think AP1000s, we built 2 in Vogtle and we're done. There are 10, 8 of them were built in China. China plans on building 6 more of them, but they also plan on deploying AP1000s across Central and Eastern Europe. So continuing to move forward on those projects, leveraging kind of like-minded countries and supporting each other. And then I just want to make an observation, because it's been something I've been thinking about all night. When I was working on the last round of COLA applications, so the last round of large-scale nuclear power plant applications, I remember talking to some individuals who had come here from Japan, and they were expressing frustration that the U.S., like at the Vogtle plant, they're like, you can't just pour base mat. Why can't you pour the base mat? And it was frustration about how the Americans forgot how to build nuclear. They had it fresh in their mind because they had just built a whole bunch of ABWRs. Right? Now, Japan is restarting a whole bunch of reactors, and there's that element of, oh shoot, how do we do this? But countries like the United States can come in and say, hey, we can help you here. We have done this. You are looking at subsequent license renewal to extend it decades beyond what you originally envisioned. We've already looked at that too. Let's share best practices and collaborate with each other. There's a great opportunity there for countries like the UK, like Japan, like Canada, like the United States to all work together to achieve a common interest. And I'm really excited to see that. I think that's where we're going to be going.
Amy, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we are out of time, but that's a wonderfully optimistic note, I think, to end on, and also a call to action, which I think is crucial. And so with that, I would like to thank, first of all, our keynote speaker, Tatsuya Terazawa-san from IEEJ, and Yamashita-san from IEEJ as well. And of course, I'd like to thank Kunia Taye from IEEJ, who put all of this together, and our panelists, Matt Bowen, Bill Martin, and Amy Roma. And I'd like to thank our in-person audience and, of course, our virtual audience. And finally, my colleagues at the Atlantic Council on our events and AV team, and my Deputy Director, Lauren Hughes. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.